so we can do this stuff in like our basements, our offices, or whatever for forever. But the idea of it being a contemporary thing anymore, that's like going on now, that you go to school and you can't fucking wait to go home and check out that function because your boy's uncle's got an MP. You know, it's just a whole different thing. I know I'm not the only one who remembers that shit, but it feels like it sometimes. I just remember you were a king if you had a good sample on a disc. You know? That one that Kane used, I forget the name of the sample, but it was the one that Big Daddy Kane used for Dance with the Devil. He sampled Jack Nicholson's voice, Dance with the Devil in the Pale Moonlight, and he sampled that shit. And then the sample that he used for the Dance with the Devil joint, I remember way before Taste the Chocolate came out, my homeboy had that sample on a disc. And when he came over, it was like somebody bringing a goddamn PlayStation 4 to a halfway house in 1989 or something like that, man. It was like the dude would come through and he would always have like this sample on a disc. And it's like, where the hell did you get that from, man? You know? And, I learned from those guys. I would watch what they did, man. And, this is before digging was like an organized thing where you had your websites and your forums and information at your fingertips. You had to learn that shit like rumors, like where to find the burning bush in The Legend of Zelda, And that whole part of the culture, there's no way to restage that and make that happen again. And I miss it. And I think that it's a shame that we're out of that period because it was just... just to kind of as a defense for why I'm always kind of on the offense and stuff, it was just so pure. It was just so pure. And, you a hot sample and a snare made you a producer. And, you could use some of that excitement to just like, listen to some of the best records. They weren't that complicated, man. They didn't have that many elements. You didn't need all this goddamn shit, on your computer where you're moving around stuff. It gets to the point where it's like, you lose that boom bap shit, that in-person shit, Peace, yo. And just taking some steps forward with this Akai MPC-3000. I just dropped a video a couple of days back when I first copped it on the 13th. 14th. And anyway, man, so this is going to be a process, right? I've gotten more familiar with some people than others, but I want to give a shout out to everybody who offered me up some suggestions with this because they all seem to be good ones. It seemed like I got a bunch of options. Nothing was really a bad suggestion. And then so I've decided to go the way of I have a zip drive that I can load old zips from like my 2000 XL. Convert them over, courtesy of a couple different people that shot me out this information. There's a way to convert over some of those 2000 XL files to get them working on my 3000, which I'd love to do because I got zips and zips full of them. Because a lot of people, they look at that big scope of things they got to learn, right? And then they'll take that and they'll get intimidated by it. And they might be chipping away at it, walk away completely. That's why you see fucking gear, get sold, when it looks like it's in mint condition because people got intimidated. The Secretary of Islam offers a reward to the best and neatest worker of this problem. There are 26 letters in the language, and if a student learns one letter per day, then how long will it take for that student to learn the 26 letters? 10 numbers in the mathematical language. Then how long will it take a student to learn the whole 10 numbers at the above rate? The average man speaks 400 words considered well. Look, man, if you got a plan for your learning, you're going to be able to see it through to the end and avoid that kind of frustration. You can actually complete something that way. So it's very simple. First day I'm going to go in here and, I'm going to finish up the learning that I have about loading and saving files, at least as it applies to the floppy. And then tomorrow, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a sample and I'm going to learn everything there is to know about editing that sample, putting it in different pads, right? Not just editing it from a standpoint of chopping off the ends and, truncating, but editing, across the board. And thank you to Philly Rich, answered a couple of my questions. why self? And I don't want to leave anybody out, because I know I got a lot of comments. Thank you very much. And so I already learned some of those basics just in a couple of conversations, but I'm gonna master editing tomorrow, right? And after I master editing, the next step I'm gonna take, because I already know how to take a sample, right? After I master editing, the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure I master that sequencer and that song mode. I'm gonna knock both those out in the same day, because I already have some foundational knowledge using the 62 tracks. As far as using tracks, I'm not sure if we've got track mute here or not, but those are things that I'm going to all find out the day of sequencing. The third day, I'm going to use specialty items, right? So I'm going to look at all these different things like step editing, transposing. I'm imagining this works a lot like the 62. I'm gonna look at the mixer effects. When I say that, I'm gonna look at like the things, the extra stuff. The beyond the bare bones of what it'll take for me to get a sample, edit it, and MIDI it into this so I can sequence it in the SP-1200. That's 3 days, man. On that fourth day, then it's time for me to really make sure I've cross-checked everything, just like when I was a barber and I was doing a haircut, and I would cross-check both sides to make sure I got it, I didn't miss anything. I'm going to go through every damn pad on this thing, go through that book I ordered, right? And I'm going to go through every single page of that book. Did I miss anything? Is there anything here I don't know how to do? And after that 4 days, right, usually I give myself longer than that because I already have some foundational knowledge. After that 4 days, I should be very proficient, right? And then from there, it should take me about 1 week to develop habits. And after I develop habits, I'm not going to have to look at the book anymore. I'm not going to have to look up any information. I'm not going to have to reference anything because it's all going to be on board memory. I'm going to be using these muscles right here to make sure that I actually memorize how to do everything, because that book, directions, not having every single function on this thing on cap, that's what makes this goddamn thing turn into a computer, and that's what separates this thing from being my instrument, right? And that's the same thing with this SP-1200. That's my instrument. 9 times out of 10, I could do this shit blindfolded. I don't even have to be looking at it, dude. I know the feels of the buttons, where they're at on the machine, just like if it was playing my guitar, right? And I think that if you're a young producer, right, and you're looking at my argument for having outboard equipment, which I know a lot of people don't agree with, and it's not necessary to make great music, I agree with that. But I'm talking to you about the advantages of actually looking at these things like real instruments that don't require some goddamn computer or program or update or anything like that, more than once every 5 or 10 years, right? When you're doing that, I think that there's a certain level of beauty to that and a certain level of artistry that you're not going to, at least I can't find it. I can't find that shit. That's why I'm putting joints out on my goddamn machine. I hear a lot of stuff on the internet that's technically amazing, right? Technically amazing. A lot of it's done on computers. Even the way they tweak the sound sounds great, right? It almost sounds robotic in nature. And I'm somebody that I prefer listening to an old Blakim Shabazz record or something like that. I prefer listening to, I prefer listening to the early EPMD albums. I like the way that they were doing samples when it was back to basics, taking a loop, adding a couple of accents, maybe throwing in a hidden drum, working with tuning the sample either very slow or very fast to make an impact, that kind of thing. I like the bare bones basic stuff. I'm not really interested in like highly technical stuff. Like it's not a fucking Tony record, man. I point you to albums like To the East Blackwards, X-Clan. I would point you to all the early Marley Marl stuff, right? I would point you to all that stuff, man. You want to talk about Philly, even before we had samplers, we had like Schoolie D, root hip hop emotion that we get from using basic tools, and boom, that, it cuts it down to real basic shit. Figure out how to do this stuff on these little screens using commands with little abbreviated things. You don't got any extra help. You have no visual representation when you're editing samples. Sit down and figure out how to do that shit. Memorize it. I mean, to me, that level of discipline, that's the kind of discipline that went into hip hop when I was coming up. I don't care about the ones. What I'm trying to do, and please, if you're somebody who's been doing this shit for 20, 30 years, or even just 10 years, you don't need to do this as long as me to know what you're doing. You're doing this 5 years and paying real close attention to history. You know your shit. I'm not trying to teach you, but what I'm saying is there's a lot of people that stumble on these kind of videos that, and what I'm doing is because my strength is in the technical, but also in the cultural aspect. I'm trying to teach kids about hip hop. People that stumble on this stuff, they've got an interest in the older equipment. They probably also have an interest in, and some of the other fundamental things about hip hop and hip hop culture and how music was created and the cultural atmosphere of that time. Maybe you do. Maybe you're a damn expert on it, and that's fine, right? So that's not who I'm speaking to. I'm speaking to that majority of people that might stumble upon this someday, looking for some kind of production tips, and they'll get that. That maybe they'll get some direction there from one of these playlists of mine, but at the same time, maybe they'll get wrapped up some conversation about hip hop that obviously anybody my age or older, 50, you guys can I'm fucking start putting start disliking my shit when I'm lying, right? Out these, emphasizing the importance of where a lot of this stuff comes from, right? You want to talk about house music with the SP-1200 or the MPC? It wasn't goddamn house artists that they were going after during the sample lawsuits of the late 80s and the early 90s. That wasn't the house artists that felt the brunt of that blow, right? It wasn't the house artists that got a goddamn landslide of legality shit thrown in their faces for expressing themselves in the early 90s. It wasn't house music or fucking electronica that had to stand through and weather that storm. It was fucking hip hop, man. It wasn't house or electronical music or any of these other goddamn genres that really took that sampling technology, which didn't start with either one of these machines or companies, right? And took that technology and actually transformed it into a mainstream tool for making music of all types of genres. All types of genres. That was hip hop music that did that. And zeros as much as y'all do. I care about how things are reflected in the culture. And everybody's the mainstream of music, hip hop, that thing's already been absorbed and taken over, right? So when I see things that are like a symbol, like the SP or something like that, I just kind of watch things get trampled over, and over time, we kind of lose a sense of where all this came from, and I'll be damned if I lose a sense of where I got it from. A little bit, learn the history of all this shit a little bit. Don't just settle for, oh, I got a nice hookup on my computer with my MIDI control device. Say, hey, I got an interest in how all this shit started. Hey, I'm inheriting a legacy. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. This stuff affects my daily life in a positive way. Huh? Who started all this? Huh? All right, here we go. All right. Oh yeah, hip hop and house. That's the same. High five, hands across America. Hey friend, you don't gotta call people by their gender, man. Oh yeah, this is all hip hop now. Man, but anyway, thanks everybody for those tips, man. I would not have been able to get the shit together as quickly without that. I would have had to kind of search around and figure out what the hell was what. So you gave me like a fast track to get my MPC up and running good. So thanks a lot, y'all. I'm gonna be out, but I'll be back in the next couple of weeks. Definitely proficient. By the time I come back, I'm gonna be proficient on that MPC, and we'll be able to get do a proper beat session. I'll see y'all soon. Peace.